The elderly millionaire sat on a park bench, motionless as if he had suddenly been switched off. His wallet lay wide open in his lap, stuffed with cash that seemed to gleam in the orange glow of dusk. Anyone passing by might think it was a stroke of luck, easy money within arm's reach. But what no one could imagine was that the man wasn't really asleep. He was pretending, and he would pretend to the very end, just to discover what the world would do when faced with temptation. A cold wind blew, kicking up small clouds of dust from the park's cracked pavement. The smell of popcorn mingled with the stench of garbage piled near the bins. The laughter of children playing in the distance contrasted with the heavy silence around the bench where he rested. The man took a deep, slow breath, trying to maintain his disguise. He felt his heart beating faster than he would have liked, as if he were about to commit a crime. But the only crime here was the loneliness that gnawed at his soul. Before reaching this point, his life had already shattered in silence. His wife, the only one who made his cold nights bearable, had passed away years ago, leaving a void impossible to fill. His children, always too busy with their own businesses and ambitions, never had time to visit. Friends? Only memories of lavish dinners remained, but no one true to share his old age with. The millionaire had discovered too late that accumulating a fortune didn't mean accumulating affection. That was why he decided to put the world to the test. He wanted to see the raw essence of humanity. He wanted to know if compassion still existed, or if everyone would sell out for easy money. The idea had come to him like a strange, desperate whisper as he walked that afternoon. Without a second thought, he set his trap. He opened his wallet, left the money exposed, and pretended to sleep. The risk was great, but not as great as his need to believe in someone again. Time seemed to drag on. People passed by. Some slowed their pace, glanced at the expensive suit, at the overflowing wallet, and then continued on their way. The man, with his eyes half closed, noticed everything through the tiny slit between his eyelids. His entire body seemed to hum with the attention. Every nearby footstep, every passing shadow, could be the final proof that the world had lost its soul. He expected the quick touch, the swift hand snatching his wallet, the end of all hope. But instead, something different happened. A little girl appeared before him. She was small, with a dirty face and bare feet, clutching a worn teddy bear to her chest and holding a tattered blanket. She didn't seem to see any fortune, didn't even seem to care about the exposed money. What she did next would leave the millionaire's heart in suspense, on the verge of breaking. The girl stood before the old man for a few seconds that felt like an eternity. Her large, attentive brown eyes examined every detail: the still body, the slow breathing, the well-tailored suit that clashed with the misery of the park. She wrinkled her nose, noticing the faint scent of expensive cologne still lingering on the man's fabric, so different from the harsh smell of the street that clung to her own skin. The cold wind cut through her thin skin, giving her goosebumps on her skinny arms. Still, she leaned in carefully, as if studying a puzzle. Was he sick or just resting? The millionaire, hidden behind his mask of false sleep, felt her presence almost physically, as if the air around him had changed. His heart pounded so loudly, it seemed to echo in the quiet park. All the girl had to do was reach out her hand, and the experiment would end in frustration. It would be just another proof that the world had become cruel. But instead, the unexpected happened. With slow, delicate movements, the girl took the old blanket she was carrying and draped it over the man's shoulders. The rough, worn fabric smelled of dust and nights spent in the open. It was her only shelter, but she offered it without hesitation. The millionaire almost lost control of his act. His chest burned, each heartbeat like the blow of a hammer. That silent gesture was worth more than any fortune stored in vaults. For the first time in years, someone had given him something without expecting anything in return. He remained motionless, but he felt a warm wave wash over him, as if he were witnessing a revelation. And she didn't stop there. With the same almost childlike delicacy, she placed her teddy bear on his lap, right next to the wallet full of money. The toy had split seams, a crooked ear, the marks of time, but it was held with the affection of someone who saw it as a friend. The teddy bear was more than an object. It was a memory, a comfort, the last trace of a childhood stolen by poverty, and now it was there, given to a stranger who seemed to need it more than she did. He felt a lump in his throat, nearly impossible to control. He wanted to open his eyes and thank her, but he held back. Why would a homeless child with nothing but a torn blanket and an old toy choose to share the little she had? His mind spun, crushed by the contradiction. It was as if the universe was forcing him to see that true wealth is not in what you own, but in your heart. The girl gave the old man one last look, said nothing and walked away slowly, disappearing into the shadows of the park. He remained still, but inside he was burning. He had to find out who that child was and why her kindness had undone him. The millionaire stayed on the bench as motionless as a statue, but inside he felt like a volcano about to erupt. The images of the girl covering him with the blanket and leaving the teddy bear wouldn't leave his mind. Every second of silence magnified the weight of that moment. He who had expected to see greed triumph had just witnessed the complete opposite, pure generosity from someone who had absolutely nothing. The stark contrast was impossible to ignore. His fortune had brought him no peace, but this child in her poverty had given him an invisible gift worth more than any sum of money. The smell of the old cloth still filled his nostrils. The rough warmth of the fabric on his shoulders seemed to burn, not from its texture, but from its meaning. It was as if every fiber of the blanket screamed a truth he had refused to face. He, with his mansions and full vaults, had never offered anything as sincere as that homeless girl. He felt a tear form under his closed eyelid, but swallowed his sob. He couldn't break character, not yet. He needed to understand more. He needed to find out who she was. Then carefully he opened one eye just enough to peek. He saw the girl walking away slowly, with small shuffling steps. The teddy bear was no longer with her, and the absence of the toy seemed to make her look even smaller, more vulnerable. He watched her every move, every detail. He noticed her cracked and wounded feet, the way she hugged her arms to her body to shield herself from the cold wind. That sight hit him harder than any physical blow could. He felt something he hadn't felt in years, the urge to get up and follow someone, not out of self-interest, but out of a need to understand. And that's exactly what he did. He waited until she was a little farther away, took a deep breath and stood up. His racing heart made him feel young again, but it also made him nervous, as if he were committing some forbidden act. He followed the girl at a safe distance, afraid she would notice him. With every step, the millionaire felt the weight of the life he led: luxury cars, trips, expensive dinners. It all seemed ridiculous in the face of the fragility of that little girl walking alone through the park. It was as if the world was rubbing his face in the fact that he had perhaps been living the wrong way for far too long. The girl turned down a narrow alley, almost hidden between two old buildings. The millionaire hesitated, but decided to continue. The strong smell of trash made him wrinkle his nose, and the distant sound of a barking dog echoed through the alley. His heart beat even faster. Each step he took heightened the feeling that he was about to discover something that would change his life forever. The alley was narrow, dark, and damp. The peeling walls of the buildings seemed to swallow the dim light from the park's lampposts. The millionaire, used to marble hallways and rooms lit by crystal chandeliers, felt a shiver run down his spine. The sour smell of garbage mixed with sewage filled the air, forcing him to breathe through his mouth. Each step echoed on the concrete, giving away his presence. For a moment he feared the girl would realize she was being followed, but she walked on, distracted, as if this scene were just another normal day in her life. The girl stopped in front of a pile of old boxes. With quick movements, she lifted two of them to reveal a small makeshift space, her hideout. This was where she slept. The millionaire's stomach churned. The place was dirty, cold, surrounded by rats that scurried in the shadows. The blanket she had just left on him was the same one she used as her only protection against the night, and now, without it, she was left with only the hard, cold ground. She showed no fear, only resignation. She sat down slowly, hugged her knees, and stared into the emptiness as if talking to her own thoughts. He watched in silence, every detail seared into his memory like a scar. Her small bruised hands trembled slightly. Her stomach rumbled loudly, betraying her hunger. Yet there was no anger in her face. There was only the deep exhaustion of someone who had learned too early that the world isn't fair. The millionaire felt his chest tighten. He asked himself, when was the last time I faced cold or hunger? He couldn't remember. He was so used to having everything served to him, that he had forgotten what it was like to fight for. The basics. As he watched her, flashes of his own life came to mind. He remembered his children always demanding more, a bigger inheritance, more benefits, more privileges. None of them had ever given anything without expecting something in return. Not even in his youth could he recall a gesture as pure as that of the girl in the park. Now facing this brutal scene, he saw the irony. Perhaps the richest person he had ever met was her, the one who possessed only a generous heart. The cold grew more intense, making the millionaire huddle against the alley wall. He thought about approaching, about offering help immediately, but something stopped him. He was afraid of scaring her. He was afraid she would reject him. More than that, he realized he needed time to understand. For the first time, he didn't want to act like the man who buys solutions. He wanted to understand before he intervened, and then the girl did something unexpected. From a hidden pocket, she pulled out a piece of hard bread, took a careful bite and shared the rest with a stray dog that approached, wagging its tail. The millionaire felt his eyes well up. The girl with nothing could still share. He, with so much, had never done the same. The millionaire remained in the shadows, watching the scene as if it were a cruel play life had staged just for him. The alley was cold, damp, and filled with small noises. The scraping of boxes, the scuttling of a rat running between garbage bags, the whistle of the wind through the cracks in the buildings. But what truly paralyzed him was the girl's silence. She didn't complain, didn't cry, didn't ask for anything. She just slowly chewed the hard piece of bread and petted the dog, as if that moment was enough to warm her heart. He closed his eyes for a few seconds and felt his throat tighten. The memory of his wife came to him, sitting on the porch of their old country house, smiling as she saw him come home from work. She always told him that the world only made sense when you learned to give, not just to receive. At the time he would laugh, thinking it was too romantic a notion. Now alone, old and surrounded by bitter memories, he realized she might have been right all along. Her absence weighed on him like lead, and the girl's gesture seemed to bring her words back to life. He opened his eyes again. The girl was wrapping her arms around herself, trying to keep warm. The dog lay down beside her, seeking to share its heat. The millionaire felt a pang in his chest. He thought of his children. Where were they right now? At some expensive restaurant, surrounded by self-serving friends, or perhaps traveling to luxurious destinations he himself had paid for over the years. He had raised heirs who never learned the value of a sincere hug, and now life was showing him a homeless child who, even in her misery, possessed something his children never had: true generosity. The night's chill made him shiver. His suit didn't feel like enough to protect him, but he didn't dare leave. It was as if he were trapped, mesmerized by the scene. Every detail, the girl's tired eyes, the way she shared her food with the dog, the way she huddled against the wall, made him question every choice he had ever made. Money, mansions, cars, trips, it all seemed empty compared to such a simple act. His mind was racing. He wondered if he would have the courage to approach, to break the invisible barrier that still kept him at a distance. But at the same time, something inside him screamed that he wasn't worthy. He who had never given anything without expecting something in return, how could he now present himself as someone capable of helping? Shame gnawed at him, and for the first time in years he felt small in the presence of another person. And then a metallic clatter echoed in the alley. A group of older boys was approaching, kicking cans and laughing loudly. The girl quickly looked up, her eyes wide with fear. The millionaire held his breath. He was about to witness the unexpected. The metallic clang echoed through the alley like a miniature thunderclap. Each kicked can reverberated off the peeling walls, mixing with the sound of mocking laughter. The millionaire shrank back against the damp wall, his heart racing, his body trembling as if made of glass. 4 boys appeared, laughing loudly, their clothes dirty and torn, their faces marked by the harshness of the streets. They were just teenagers, but there was something cold in their eyes, as if the world had already stolen any trace of innocence from them. The dog growled softly, its fur standing on end, but the girl pulled it closer, trying to protect it. Her eyes, huge and frightened, reflected the fear of someone who knew this kind of threat all too well. "Look who's here again," one of the boys said, dragging out the words with contempt. The others laughed, clapping as if it were an inside joke. They approached slowly. with the cruel calmness of predators who enjoy watching their prey tremble before they strike. The girl backed away until she was pressed against the damp wall. The cold seeped through her thin clothes, and the wind made her teeth chatter. But the fear was greater than the cold. The dog barked bravely, but one of the teenagers kicked the ground right in front of it. The animal retreated, yelping. The girl hunched her shoulders, hugged her knees, and lowered her head as if she could disappear. The millionaire, hidden, watched it all with his chest on fire. His clenched fists were trembling. He wanted to run over, to shout, to drive those boys away, but his feet wouldn't obey. It had been decades since he had faced any danger without security guards or lawyers. Now, in the face of raw poverty, he found himself fragile. The boys started rummaging through the boxes that served as the girl's shelter. They kicked them, threw them aside, laughing all the while. "This trash isn't yours, brat," one of them shouted, shoving her with his shoulder. She didn't react, just breathed quickly, trying not to cry. The millionaire felt shame run like sweat down the back of his neck. He who had always controlled companies, contracts, and million-dollar figures now couldn't even control his own cowardice. Suddenly, one of the boys pulled a piece of hard, moldy bread from his pocket. "You hungry, princess?" he asked, laughing. He threw the bread on the ground right in front of her. The girl looked at the bread, then at them, and shook her head no. The silent firmness in her eyes was an unexpected challenge. Even starving, she wouldn't accept a handout that came with humiliation. The boys burst into laughter, kicking the bread away as if it were just a toy. The millionaire swallowed hard. This child with nothing still had more honor than he did. His stomach was churning, his heart hammering. He took a deep breath, the foul air burning his lungs. Then he took a step. The sound of his shoes echoed on the concrete, and they all turned, surprised. The sharp sound of leather shoes on concrete echoed in the alley, cutting through the boys' mocking laughter. They all turned at once, their eyes narrowed, trying to figure out who dared to interrupt their fun. The figure of the old man emerged slowly from the shadows, his face serious, his shoulders straight, his immaculate suit clashing with the filthy surroundings. His heart was beating so hard, it felt like it would escape his chest, but he didn't back down. Every step he took was a challenge to his own cowardice, a silent scream against years of silence and conformity. "Who are you?" one of the teenagers asked, frowning. "Lost your way to the prom, Grandpa." The laughter started again, but there was a hint of uncertainty in it now. The man's firm, unexpected presence shook their confidence. The millionaire took a deep breath, feeling the foul air of the alley fill his lungs. His voice came out hoarse but steady. "Leave the girl alone now." The boys exchanged glances, and the one who seemed to be the leader stepped forward. "And if we don't want to?" he said, crossing his arms. "What are you going to do, old man?" The girl looked at the millionaire in astonishment. Her large, frightened eyes tried to understand who this man was, why someone so well-dressed was there defending her. The dog, sensing the change in atmosphere, started growling again, its fur on end. The tension in the air was palpable. The millionaire felt cold sweat trickle down his temple. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to run, but there was something bigger inside him now. His wife's face came to mind, with that serene smile that always seemed to say, "The world needs those who have the courage to give, not just those who take." He had never given anything without expecting something in return until this moment. And he wouldn't be a coward one more time. "You already have so little. Don't take the little from someone who has nothing," he said, his voice firm even though his throat burned. The silence that followed was short but heavy. The boys laughed again, louder this time, trying to hide their discomfort. The leader, however, clenched his fists and walked toward the millionaire. The old man felt his legs tremble, but he didn't retreat. A chill ran down his spine. There were no bodyguards, no walls, just him, the girl, and 4 furious teenagers. The girl held the dog tightly and whispered something, almost like a prayer. The millionaire kept his eyes fixed on the approaching boy. He knew that the next second could change everything. The boy who seemed to be the leader approached slowly, dragging his feet on the concrete, his eyes fixed on the millionaire. The alley seemed to shrink, the air growing denser, as if even the walls were holding their breath. The old man stood his ground, but he felt his legs tremble under the strain. Cold sweat trickled down his neck as his heart beat erratically. "You don't know what you're getting into, old man," the teenager said, his voice laced with threat. "This is our street. This girl already knows that." He gave a crooked smile showing yellowed teeth. "And now you show up, thinking you can give orders." The other boys laughed, egging him on. One of them kicked a box against the wall, the bang echoing like a gunshot. The millionaire took a deep breath, trying to control the instinct to flee. He hadn't faced anything so raw, so dangerous in years, but running would mean accepting his cowardice. And he knew that if he took one step back, he would lose more than his dignity. He would lose his last chance to prove to himself that he was still human. The girl watched the scene, her eyes shining with tears, the dog growling in vain. She seemed torn between wanting to scream and fearing that any sound would make things worse. With every move the boys made, she shrank further, but she never took her eyes off the old man. A question grew inside her. Why was this strange man risking anything for her? The millionaire kept his chin up, even as his body was on high alert. "I said, leave the girl alone, I won't repeat myself," he said slowly, feeling his own voice echo firmly despite his dry throat. The leader of the boys laughed loudly, a harsh sound that echoed through the alley. "And if I don't? You gonna hit me?" He took another step, getting so close that the millionaire could smell the strong scent of cigarettes on his clothes. The old man swallowed hard. Every muscle in his body seemed to beg for surrender, but there was something greater inside him. He remembered his wife again and the words he had so often ignored. He also remembered the children who had grown cold and distant. He realized that if he did nothing now, he would be just another dead weight in his own life. "Then try," he said, his voice low but sharp. Silence fell over the alley. The boys stopped laughing. The girl held her breath. The next move could change everything. The lead boy narrowed his eyes and lunged forward, shoving his chest against the millionaire's. The impact, though not violent, sent the old man stumbling back a step. His heart raced, and for a moment, the instinct to run screamed inside him. But instead, he planted his feet firmly on the ground and faced the teenager again. The other three boys moved in, laughing, forming a threatening circle around him and the girl. The dog barked desperately but was quickly silenced by a kick in the air that made it retreat, yelping. "See, old man," the leader said with a cruel smile. "You're not in charge here. This street is ours. This alley is ours. Anyone who comes here only leaves if we let them." The millionaire was breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling rapidly. He felt fragile, old, but at the same time a fire was burning inside him. It wasn't just anger, it was a need to protect. Something he had forgotten existed within him. "I'm not leaving," he said, his voice firm, though his body trembled. "Not until you leave this girl in peace." The boys roared with laughter. One spat on the ground, another clapped his hands, mocking him. "Look at this, Grandpa Hero," he shouted. "Want to save the little street rat? You'll end up worse than her." The girl watched the scene in silence, her heart beating so fast it felt like it would leap from her chest. Her eyes filled with tears, but there was something new in them, a spark of hope. No one had ever stood up for her before. Seeing this, rich, strange, different man facing down four boys just to defend her, made something inside her tremble, but not with fear. It was something like believing that maybe, just maybe, there was still good in the world. The leader brought his face close to the millionaire's, so close he could smell the sour stench of alcohol on his breath. "Last chance, old man. Get out of here before I show you how the streets treat snobs." The millionaire didn't blink. The memory of his wife smiling, of her words about courage and generosity, came back to him. He also thought of his children, who would probably never understand this moment, but who for the first time didn't matter. What mattered was the girl huddled against the wall, hugging the dog. He lifted his chin. "Then do it. But know that I won't back down." The silence stretched for an eternal second. The leader clenched his hand into a fist, raising it slowly. The girl let out a muffled cry. The millionaire didn't move. The next moment would decide everything. The boy's clenched fist came down fast, aimed at the millionaire's face. The impact was unavoidable. The punch struck his cheek, snapping his head to the side. The pain was sharp, like a flame searing his skin. His body staggered and he nearly lost his balance, but he didn't fall. Running on instinct, he steadied himself, took a deep breath, and straightened up. The metallic taste of blood filled his Mouth but his eyes, instead of looking down, rose even more determined. The boys laughed, celebrating the blow as if victory were already theirs. The confident leader raised his fist again, but before he could launch another attack, the millionaire, in a surge of strength he didn't know he had, grabbed the teenager's arm. His fingers, though aged, clamped down like talons, stopping the motion. The boy was surprised and tried to pull away, but the old man held him with unexpected force, as if decades of repression and silence were being unleashed in that one grip. "I've already lost everything that mattered in my life," the millionaire said, his deep voice echoing in the alley. "I'm not going to lose my dignity too." The silence that followed made even the other three boys hesitate. The leader tugged at his arm, but the old man wouldn't let go. The dog barked again, emboldened, and the girl huddled on the ground stared with wide eyes, unable to believe what she was seeing. The rich man who had pretended to be asleep in the park was now standing up to four violent teenagers, refusing to back down. The leader managed to wrench his arm free with a shove, sending the millionaire stumbling back 2 steps. "Who do you think you are, old man?" he shouted, furious. "You think you can take me on just because you wear a suit?" The other boys closed in, ready to attack together. The millionaire felt fear rise in his throat, but it was mixed with something new, a flame. For the first time in years, he felt alive, even in this dangerous situation. He looked at the girl, who was staring at him with tears and surprise. He realized that if he retreated now, it wouldn't just be him who lost, but her too. She would lose the chance to believe that someone could stand by her side. He took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and raised his voice. "If you want to take me down, you'll have to try it together. But know this, I'm not taking another step back." The unexpected bravery silenced the boys' laughter for a moment. The entire alley seemed to fall quiet. The girl clutched the dog to her chest, her eyes shining through her fear. The leader clenched his fists again and shouted to the others, "Let's just finish him." The 4 boys rushed forward at once like a starving pack. The millionaire instinctively raised his arms, trying to protect himself, but the difference in age and strength was brutal. The first punch hit his stomach, knocking the wind out of him with a dry thud. He doubled over, gasping for air, but didn't fall. Another kick landed on his leg, making him stagger. His body begged for surrender, but something stronger kept him on his feet, the certainty that he couldn't give up in front of that girl. "Come on, old man, just fall already," one of the teenagers yelled, laughing. The dog barked, running in circles, not brave enough to attack but trying to protect its owner. The girl was crying silently, tears streaming down her dirty face. She wanted to scream for them to stop. She wanted to run to him, but fear kept her paralyzed. The millionaire felt each blow like a hot coal against his skin. The taste of blood was thick in his mouth. His knee ached, his shoulder burned, but something was growing inside him, a flame that burned not with pain, but with resistance. He raised his eyes and stared at the leader, even as he bled. "You think you're strong because you beat up on the defenseless, but one day you'll understand what it means to be truly weak." The boys laughed even harder, mocking his words. The leader shoved the millionaire against the wall, pinning him with a hand on his chest. "And what do you know about weakness, old man?" he spat, his alcohol-laced breath filling the air. "You've never lived on the street." The millionaire swallowed hard, but didn't look away. "I know what it's like to lose everything, and I know the street is no excuse to lose your humanity." The leader raised his fist once more, and the whole alley seemed to freeze. The girl, unable to hold back any longer, screamed, "Stop!" Her voice echoed, trembling but filled with desperation. The boys looked at her, laughing even harder, as if her plea was just fuel for their cruelty. The millionaire, seizing the brief moment of distraction, shoved the leader with surprising force. The boy stumbled back 2 steps, his eyes wide with anger. The silence was broken by his shout, "Get this old man now!" The girl's heart pounded. The dog barked louder. The millionaire knew he was at his limit. A final confrontation was about to happen, and he wasn't sure he would get out of it alive. The leader's shout echoed through the alley like a death sentence. The 3 remaining boys advanced together, their footsteps reverberating on the wet concrete. The millionaire raised his arms again, but his body no longer responded as quickly. The first kick landed on his ribs, the second on his shoulder, and the third on his leg. He staggered and fell to his knees. The cold from the ground seeped through his suit, and pain throbbed in every muscle. Still, he didn't let out a single groan, just took deep breaths, as if each inhale was an act of defiance. "Look at the hero now," one of the boys mocked, kicking the wallet that had fallen from the old man's pocket. Bills scattered across the dirty ground, fluttering in the wind. Their eyes lit up with greed, but they weren't done with the fun of humiliating him yet. The millionaire tried to get up, but his legs trembled. The leader, taking advantage of his weakness, grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the wall. The impact left him dizzy, but his eyes remained fixed on the girl. And in that instant, something unexpected happened. The girl, overcome with despair, let go of the dog and ran toward the boys. She raised her small arms, trying to push the leader, even knowing she didn't have the strength. "Leave him alone!" she cried, her voice choked with tears. Her face was wet, but there was courage in every word. The leader looked at her and laughed. "Gonna defend Grandpa now, huh?" he said, brutally shoving her aside. The girl fell to the ground but got back up, even with scraped knees. Seeing this, the millionaire felt a wave of fury and shame wash over him. How could he let her, so small and fragile, do what he was failing to do? Gathering his last reserves of strength, he struggled to his feet, leaning against the wall. "Enough!" he shouted, his voice booming through the alley as never before. His hand was trembling, but his gaze was fiery. The boys glanced at each other, surprised for a moment by the resolve still left in that tired body. The dog started barking again, running in circles, trying to distract the attackers. The girl stood beside the millionaire, breathless but determined. She looked him in the eyes. In that look was something he hadn't seen in years: trust. For the first time in a long time, someone believed in him. The leader gritted his teeth and raised his fist again. Ready to deliver another blow, the millionaire felt the world slow down. He knew that this moment would decide not just the fight, but perhaps his entire life. The leader's fist rose in the air, ready to come down on the millionaire. But before the blow could land, something unexpected happened. The dog, in a surge of courage, lunged forward, growling, and sank its teeth into the attacker's pant leg. The boy lost his balance for a second, stumbling backward and nearly falling. The laughter of the others died, replaced by a stunned silence. The girl seized the moment and grabbed the old man's arm, pulling him with a child's strength, but one full of urgency. "Let's go, please, stop," she pleaded, her eyes welling with tears. The millionaire, however, didn't move. Pain throbbed through every part of his body. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth, but something was burning inside him, something greater than fear. "No, little one, I'm not running away," he said in a hoarse but firm voice. His eyes shone with a determination the girl had never seen in anyone. For the first time, someone seemed willing to stand by her side until the end. The leader, furious, kicked the dog away, freeing his pants. "You're going to regret this, you old bastard," he yelled, preparing to charge again, but the millionaire took a step forward. His body was stooped with age, but his gaze was held high like a warrior's. "It doesn't matter what you do to me," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "I will not let you lay another finger on this girl." The boys looked at each other. The conviction in the old man's voice shook their confidence for a moment. They weren't used to seeing someone stand up to them without backing down. The tense silence was broken only by the millionaire's heavy breathing and the girl's sobs. The entire alley seemed to be waiting for the next move. One of the teenagers stepped forward but hesitated. The leader, enraged, tried to spur the others on. "What's wrong? You gonna chicken out because of some old man?" His tone was more nervous now, betraying his insecurity. The others laughed weakly. It wasn't the same confident laughter as before. The millionaire, taking advantage of their hesitation, continued, "You think you're strong because you own the street, because you can beat up someone with nothing. But one day you'll find out that there is no greater strength than protecting someone." He raised his voice and his words echoed in the alley. "This girl is already braver than all of you put together." The girl clutched the hem of his jacket, her eyes shining with tears. For the first time, she felt she wasn't alone. The dog, though injured, took up its position in front of her again like a small guardian. The leader gritted his teeth, furious, and charged with everything he had. The millionaire took a deep breath. The turning point was about to happen. The leader rushed forward with a clenched fist, ready to end the millionaire's resistance for good. The air in the alley seemed to freeze and the girl held her breath. But just as the blow was about to land, the old man raised his arm and caught the boy's fist firmly. His fingers, marked by age, closed with an unexpected strength, almost impossible for someone in his condition. Shock spread across the teenager's face as he tried to pull his arm back but couldn't immediately break free. "Enough!" the millionaire roared, his voice reverberating off the narrow walls. "That's enough." The other boys, surprised, took a step back. The leader struggled to get loose, but the old man pushed him hard, causing him to stumble and fall, sitting on the filthy ground. The impact silenced the group for a few seconds. The girl, her mouth open, could hardly believe what she was seeing. This man, who had seemed so fragile to everyone, had managed to knock down the boy who terrorized her night after night. The leader scrambled to his feet, his face flushed more with anger than pain. "You're gonna pay for this, old man," he shouted, but his voice no longer held the same confidence. The other teenagers, sensing the shift in power, hesitated. None of them moved with the same assurance. The millionaire's figure, though panting and injured, seemed larger, more imposing, held up by something invisible: dignity. The girl, still hugging the dog, slowly got up and ran to him. "No, please," she begged, placing herself between the millionaire and the boys. She raised her small arms, trying to push the leader, even knowing she didn't have the strength. "That's enough. You don't have to do this." The silence was broken only by the distant wail of a siren. The sound echoed through the city and seemed to be getting closer. The boys exchanged nervous glances. "Let's get out of here," one of them said, pulling the leader by the arm. "The cops are coming!" The leader resisted for a moment, but upon hearing the rising sound of the siren again, he spat on the ground and backed away. "This isn't over, old man." And then he turned, running with the others until they disappeared into the alley's shadows. The millionaire fell to his knees, exhausted, his body aching with pain. The girl knelt beside him, placing her small hands on his shoulders. "Are you okay, sir?" she asked, her voice trembling. He was breathing with difficulty, but there was a new light in his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt alive. The silence that filled the alley after the boys fled felt almost sacred. The sound of the sirens, once threatening, now faded into the distance as if its only purpose had been to scatter the danger. The millionaire was on his knees, panting, his entire body throbbing as if every muscle had been struck. The taste of blood still lingered in his mouth, and cold sweat ran down his wrinkled skin. But despite the pain, there was something different in his chest, a flame that had seemed extinguished for years. The girl knelt beside him, her small hands trembling as she touched his shoulders. "Are you okay, sir?" she asked, her voice choked with emotion, her eyes brimming with tears. The millionaire looked at her up close for the first time. He saw the dirt on her face, her tangled hair, her scraped knees from the fall, but behind the battered appearance was something that disarmed him, a rare purity, a courage that defied her misery. He tried to smile, but it was just a faint sketch of an expression. "I've been better, but I've also been worse," he murmured with weak but sincere humor. The girl gave a shy, almost embarrassed smile, and it was like a balm to him. The dog limped over and lay down beside the girl, still growling softly, as if making sure the danger wouldn't return. The millionaire reached out and gently petted the animal's head. "Brave one," he said quietly, recognizing in the small creature the same bravery he had seen in the girl. The girl hugged the teddy bear to her chest, the same one she had left with him earlier, and said, "They always do that. They think they can mess with me because I don't have anyone." Her voice broke, but then it returned steady. "But today, you stayed." The millionaire felt his throat close up. Her words hit him harder than any punch. Stayed, that was it. After years of running from his own emptiness, from his own fears, he had chosen to stay. For her and for himself. "I'm not going anywhere," he said firmly, looking into her eyes. "Not anymore." Tears streamed down the girl's face, but this time they weren't just tears of sadness. There was something new. Hope. She allowed herself to rest her head on his shoulder, as if she were finally safe. The millionaire closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the light weight of that trust. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone. The millionaire was breathing with difficulty, but he couldn't take his eyes off the girl. There was an urgency inside him, a need to understand who this child was, who, with nothing, had given him everything in a single gesture. In a hoarse voice, he asked. "What's your name?" The girl hesitated, hugging her teddy bear even tighter. She looked at him with suspicion, but there was something in her tired gaze that pleaded for sincerity. "My name is Anna," she answered softly. "I'm 9 years old." The name echoed in the old man's mind as if it were heavier than any dollar amount. Anna, a simple name, but filled with a dignity that moved him. "Where are your parents?" he ventured to ask, though he feared the answer. She lowered her head, her eyes filling with tears. "I don't know," she murmured. "My mom left me on the street when I was really little. She said she'd come back, but she never did. My dad, I don't even remember him." Her voice broke and she fell silent for a moment, as if reopening an old wound. The millionaire's heart ached. He had never felt so much weight in such few words. His mind went back to his own children, how they always complained about what they had, how they had drifted away from him, even when he offered them everything. And here before him was a girl who had never had anything, and yet she offered the world a kindness that he himself had forgotten. "And where do you sleep?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Anna pointed to the overturned boxes now scattered on the ground. "Sometimes I can stay somewhere else, but usually it's here. When it rains, I just try to curl up and wait for it to pass." The millionaire closed his eyes for a moment, swallowing the lump in his throat. The cold, the hard ground, the uncertainty. He tried to imagine his own childhood in this setting and couldn't. The thought tore him apart inside. "And the teddy bear?" he asked, trying to soften the mood. Anna hugged the toy to her chest. "He's the only thing I've had since I was little. When I'm scared, I talk to him. I left him with you today because I thought you needed him more than I did." The tears finally rolled down the old man's face. The girl who should have been cared for was the one who had cared for him. The reversal of that logic shattered him, but at the same time it reconnected him with something he thought he had lost. He took her small hand in his own rough, trembling ones. "Anna, you won't have to go through this alone anymore. I promise." The girl's eyes widened, full of both disbelief and hope. The silence that hung in the alley now carried a different weight. It was no longer the silence of fear, but a silence filled with revelations. The millionaire held the girl's hand in his, feeling the fragility of her small fingers. For a moment, he saw in her a reflection of his own soul, lonely, abandoned, searching for a reason to go on in the emptiness. "You know, Anna," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I lived for many years believing that money was everything. I thought that if I had enough, I would want for nothing. In the end, I discovered that I have everything and I have nothing." He closed his eyes, remembering the silent mansion, the empty hallways, the distant children. "But today, what you gave me is worth more than any fortune." The girl watched him in silence, hugging her teddy bear tightly. She didn't fully understand the weight of his words, but she felt the truth in them. His was not the look of someone just talking. It was the look of someone stripped of all pride. The millionaire took a deep breath. "I lost my wife a few years ago. She was the only one who reminded me that I was still human. After she was gone, I was just empty. My children grew distant, and I was surrounded by everything except what truly mattered." He looked at Anna, his eyes misty. "And then you appeared. A girl who has nothing and yet has more than I do." Anna looked down shyly. "I don't have anything, sir. Just this teddy bear and the dog." She paused, then added in a low voice, "And now I have you." Her words pierced the old man's heart like an arrow. He felt the tears roll shamelessly. This small being, whom life had crushed so early, saw something in him that he himself had forgotten: value. He looked around at the damp, filthy alley and felt a revolt grow inside him. How was it possible that children like her were left here, invisible, ignored, while he spent fortunes on dinners where no one even remembered to say thank you? An idea began to form in his mind, still uncertain but powerful. It wasn't just about Anna. It was about him. It was about finding a purpose again. "Anna," he said, his voice firm but gentle, "would you like to never have to sleep on the street again?" Her eyes widened, shining brighter than ever before. She didn't answer right away, just looked at him with a mix of fear, hope, and disbelief. The millionaire gave a tired but sincere smile. "Because I think it's time for both of us to change our lives." Anna blinked several times, as if she hadn't quite understood the question. Her little heart raced, her hands trembled. "Never on the street again?" she repeated, her voice weak, almost a whisper. The millionaire nodded slowly, holding her hands in his. "Never again," he said with the firmness of a promise that could not be broken. "You won't be cold anymore. You won't sleep in fear anymore. I have space more than I need. And what I've never had until today was someone to remind me of what really matters." Tears streamed down the girl's face, and she threw herself at him, hugging him with all the strength she had. The impact was small, but to the old man it felt as if the world itself were embracing him. He felt something he had lost years ago, a sense of belonging. The money, the mansion, the cars, none of it mattered anymore. In that hug, he found everything he had been searching for in silence for so long. The dog barked softly, coming closer and lying down beside them, as if sealing their silent pact. The alley, once a stage for violence and pain, now seemed transformed into a haven of hope. The millionaire took a deep breath and said calmly, "Anna, from today on, you're not alone anymore." "And neither am I," his voice cracked, but his smile remained. He lifted her into his arms with effort, but also with pride. As they walked slowly out of the alley, the cold night wind felt different. It was no longer the breath of loneliness, but the announcement of a new beginning. Anna clutched the teddy bear to her chest, but now she was smiling, because she knew it wasn't just the toy protecting her anymore. She had someone. The millionaire, for his part, felt the weight of his tired body, but there was a new lightness inside him. He thought of his wife, and imagined that wherever she was, she would be smiling at that moment. He thought of his children, and understood that he might never have their love again, but he had found something even greater, the chance to love again. As they passed through the park where it had all begun, he looked at the bench where he had pretended to sleep. The wallet full of money, which he had thought was the ultimate test, meant nothing now. The real test had been him, and Anna had been the answer. The old man looked up at the starry sky and let a tear roll down his cheek. "Thank you," he murmured, not knowing if he was speaking to God, to his wife, or to life itself. And so two broken souls became whole. If you liked this story, then like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos.